Hey everybody, John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. I am coming with a review I know everybody's been waiting for me to do ever since I posted that I'd read this on Facebook in the Epic Collection group a couple weeks ago. Maybe it was a week ago. I don't remember. Time's been crazy lately. And this is X-Men Second Genesis. And this is the beginning of the Chris Claremont run. For those who aren't familiar with the history of the X-Men actually launched as a fairly unsuccessful book. Stan Kirby and Jack Lee. Let's start right there. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby launched the book. It was another team book after their successful Fantastic Four and Avengers, and they hoped that this would get going. And it really just didn't have the spark of the others. You had your 5 team members: Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, Jean Grey, and Angel. And all under the tutelage of Professor X. They were students who felt like they were college students or something like that at this gifted school. And he was training them in various different ways. And every issue almost was like, Magneto and his evil villains are facing off against the X-Men again. And it felt like a Saturday morning cartoon where it was just the same villain over and over again. Very uninspired. Roy Thomas took it over, then it went back to Lee, then it went back to Roy Thomas, and there were a couple good issues in there. It started getting a little better when they introduced like Havoc, which is Cyclops' half-brother later on, but it was a little too late, and the book went into reprints for the next several years. They just threw it into reprints, and it was kind of canceled, not canceled. Very odd. And I'm surprised it lasted in reprints as long as it did. And at some point, they decided to relaunch the book and redo the book, which is what we got here. So after all the reprints had been going for years, they decided to restart the book, and that's what this covers. It covers Giant Size X-Men #1, which is where they introduced the new team, plus X-Men numbers 94 through 110, I'm sorry. And that's a good year and a half of X-Men right there. Plus Iron Fist 14 and 15, where the X-Men make an appearance. A bunch of Marvel team-up issues, which are kind of interesting, from 53 to 69 and 70, and the annual #1 of Marvel Team-Up also. So let's dive inside and see what goes on with this. Now, Chris Claremont's run here begins and lasts for years. I mean, I think 20 years or something like that. I don't remember exactly how long. And it's hailed as one of the best X-Men runs of all time, if not the best, and it is the definitive X-Men. If you watch the cartoon from the 90s, it references a lot of this material. At the very beginning here, we have the all-new X-Men, right? And all the X-Men that we knew from before up here are missing, and Xavier is grabbing all these different people from around the world to basically help go find them. They went missing on this island of Krakoa, and all these mutants get recruited, and it becomes like, instead of just like this team, it becomes like the United Nations of X-Men, as we have a German guy, a Russian guy, Storms from Africa, we got a Native American guy, we got Wolverine from Canada, we got Banshee from Scotland, and we got a guy from Japan too. Sunfire is his name. And they all band together. The first beginning of it is Professor X approaching all these people and getting them to come over. Now, Wolverine was previously introduced in a couple Hulk issues that led right into this. So the Hulk issues showed him fighting Wolverine and being deployed, or fighting the Hulk and being deployed as a Hulkbuster sort of deal. And he fails, and then this is his next appearance. And so Xavier approaches them all. Cyclops is the only person who got out of that whole situation alive. He explains what happens. They're all trapped on Krakoa, and then they go to Krakoa and find out that Krakoa is a living island in and of itself, and it is a giant monster that they have to face, and they succeed. And it's a very fun issue, very good stuff, and it's much better than the other X-Men stuff before, so everybody's extremely happy. Now, the art for these first few issues is done by Dave Cockrum, and Dave Cockrum designed a lot of these elements and characters here, so he did a great job. This is the style of comics that I think really shines, and I think is the best comic artwork out there. This era in general, so very enjoyable. And he doesn't last all that long, but we'll get to that in a second. Next, Count Nefaria, who he fought the X-Men in a couple issues. back in the early ones, and he makes his return as we deal with see these new X-Men and old X-Men back together. And Nefaria like had these like creatures he was dealing with it was like a band of misfits fighting alongside him against the X-Men before, and now he's got these like animal creatures, and the X-Men take him down. Now the other X-Men all decide to go on a break together and not actually fight, so we get only the new X-Men under Cyclops' tutelage, and that's the explanation for that. So here we are. We got War Hunt in this issue, and X-Men dies. Oh, yay. Very important. And, you know, people actually just died in comics back in the day. It wasn't like it used to be. And we've got the little animals fighting still versus Kent Nefaria. And it looks, and Thunderbird, spoilers, goes out and he stops this jet from taking off, and it blows up, and Thunderbird dies in the process. Pretty good issue for a third issue. I mean, that's pretty high stakes as it is. You know, I mean, it's surprising. And you're sitting there like, how is Claremont going to even ramp it up from there? Is this even Claremont? It is Claremont. Okay, but there's also like Claremont like started with not just him. It was like Len Wein, however you pronounce his name, and Bill Mantlo were doing plot assistance for him, and Claremont was under tight control, under scripting for the first few issues here. And then it really opens up. It's really interesting. So it seems like there's a few just like single issue things where they are really establishing these characters. They establish Moira McTaggart as the housekeeper who's coming over from Scotland, and she's got a history with Professor X. We don't know about it. And a demon attacks here, which is pretty neat. And Professor X has to deal with these like demon things. Pretty fun. All right. And then it goes right into Havoc comes back, and Havoc and his girlfriend Lorna Dane are brainwashed and under control of this Eric the Red, which I think we're led to believe that this is Magneto at first. It was kind of like, if you read it for the first few issues, you're like, it's going to be Magneto. And then there's a twist there. And there's also a plot of this guy from this organization to like restart the Sentinels and all that. And here they come. The Sentinels come back. Merry Christmas. Can you say that in a comic book these days? Jeez. It's not very PC at all. Anyway, they have a Christmas issue with the Sentinels. Very fun stuff also. As the Sentinels go through and ravage the X-Men. We do it again. They go to a space station here. And this becomes a common theme in X-Men books from here on out after this. And we have this epic battle of what looks like the old X-Men versus the new X-Men coming up now. So now Claremont's really in charge, and things get really wacky from here forward. Now we're in the 100th issue. The X-Battle of the old versus new comes out. Turns out they're robots, and then they are descending on Earth. And here's where the whole Phoenix Saga starts. Now this is where X-Men becomes really what everybody wants it to be. And so the Phoenix Saga starts, and it goes into the Dark Phoenix Saga. They have an omnibus that reprints from here forward, and just all the Phoenix issues of the Dark Phoenix Saga also. And it's in print, and he's defined also. So if you want an oversized version of that, it exists. And she gets instilled with the Phoenix Force, crashes a jet, looks like she's dead for a sec, and then it turns out she's, just resting. And then half the team's going to Banshee's former castle, and I guess he has a castle and all that, and they get duped into being there with Tom Cassidy, Black Tom Cassidy, who is related to the Banshee, and then the Juggernaut is there also. Turns out it's a trap, and we get to fight the Juggernaut again in this issue. We learn a lot about Storm's background also, which is really nice. I love the art in here. This is really pretty stuff. So, good issue. Again, there's just not been a bad issue, and we're going through, and we're continuing the story of the Banshee and all that. And meanwhile, Professor X back home is actually having visions that there's going to be some weird problem from space. And now Magneto shows up. No Eric the Red, so no mention of Eric the Red. Magneto shows up to fight the new X-Men, and the X-Men get to face off against the real villain, Magneto. Yay. And it turns out Eric the Red is somewhere else, so it's not actually Magneto. This is where we kind of learn that it's not Magneto. And there we go. And we get another issue where Eric the Red shows up. Oh no! And they fight him and Firelord. Now it's getting cosmic. And I don't know, honestly, I've not read other issues with Firelord. I'm not sure where he showed up before this or not. He says Galactus is former Herald, so I guess he's been in Fantastic Four probably. And he's teaming up with Eric the Red. And it turns out there's been this like space thing that Professor Xavier's been mentally telepathically connected with this entire time, that he has to they have to like help save this Princess Lilandra from people who are trying to kill them and take over the universe and destroy the universe. And this is the first big like epic universe shattering X moment. So excellent storyline. Phoenix really comes into their power here. Is John Byrne on art already? Did Cockrum leave? Let me check. I think so. No, Cockrum's still here for this issue. Interesting. Bob Layton is doing the inks on, or at least some. Is he sharing art duties or doing inks? It just says Bob Layton. So I'm gonna guess he either does some of the finishes or the inks. Bob Layton did a lot of stuff for Valiant later on. Pretty cool stuff. And then the X-Men get thrown into this whole cosmic saga where we learn about what's going on in the universe and where no X-Men has gone before, the big Star Trek reference right there. And it just escalates into cosmic goodness. Big team book, lots of action. We don't learn a ton about what's going on here. They introduce characters called the Starjammers here, which pop in throughout X history and all that, and then get its own title a little bit later. And Lilandra's from the Shi'ar Empire, another cosmic empire force like the Kree and Skrulls, which recur throughout the X universe and all the Marvel universes. And we meet a lot of different people who show up as different villains later in Marvel. Tons of action, beautiful art, and here we go. And now we are 100% on John Byrne art. So John Byrne takes over for the next couple of years here, which is great. John Byrne is, probably the best artist through the Marvel years, because if you look at his just body of work, obviously you can make different arguments for anybody, but if you look at his body of work, his Fantastic Four is probably the most important Fantastic Four stuff out there. His X-Men stuff is the most important X-Men stuff out there. His Namor run was probably the most important Namor out there. His Avengers West Coast really defined a lot of those characters also. So John Byrne was really instrumental in defining a lot of these characters in Marvel, and people, he gets a lot of credit, but he's not usually put up there on the art level with like the original guys, and I think he deserves to be. So we are still in the Cosmic Saga here, and the Captain Marvel gal shows up at this point, who becomes Jean Grey's roommate, and it actually pauses things here. Does it end things here? Oh, okay, it does end things here, and the cosmic thing goes away. Lilandra fades back into her empire, and there's I guess she loves Professor X now, and that's that. And we get a break from the actual storyline here to bring us the Iron Fist stuff, because we saw Jean Grey's roommate referenced in the last issue, and Iron Fist actually breaks into the apartment because it's Misty Knight's place, and he's looking for Misty Knight, and he gets into a hero on hero battle versus the X-Men, and he actually deals with Sabretooth before that, and it turns out it's a mistake, and yay, we're all friends. This is so sad. And Daniel Rand ends up owning Jean Grey's apartment or something like that. Very a little odd to throw in there, and I know that was toward the end of the run of Iron Fist, so I just wish that series went longer. It was very good by itself, but that's a story for another time. So now we get into a little Wolverine history. Weapon Alpha comes from Canada and from Alpha Flight in order to fight Wolverine and try to bring him back, and Wolverine beats him away with the help of the X-Men. We get some cheesecake action right here, and just single one-off issue of that. I think they're trying to dial down the X-Men were on leave and vacation a little bit. Got to dial down the danger a little bit from the like epic, galactic spanning saved the entire multiverse with the Phoenix Power that came before. Otherwise, you know, you can't keep one-upping without some breaks in between. And we get a nice Marvel team-up, annual #1, where the X-Men go into the desert with Spider-Man and end up dealing with these people-turned-creatures. This is a very good issue. It was a lot of fun. And that ends up with, that goes into, I believe, the issue 53, where Spider-Man and the Hulk kind of go off together. And the Banshee drops Spider-Man off. And that's about all that happens in that issue that deals with the X-Men, but I guess that's how they do the continuity. And then they have another sort of rest issue as issue number 10 because you know, they're playing baseball. I like it when they incorporate things like baseball and fun into these books, show the human side a little bit. And then Warhawk shows up, takes over the Danger Room, screws up the Danger Room, and he's working on behalf of his master to try to I guess, gain their sense of how good they are or whatnot for a future battle or something like that. And X-Men must prepare now. And that's the end of the actual X-Men series in here. And I actually appreciate the Marvel team-ups being in here to kind of pad this because you get a couple extra issues. Havoc and the Pharaoh have had a past before, and so it's nice to see them fighting again, and he becomes a giant living monolith fighting Spider-Man. And then Thor and Spider-Man end up taking him down and rescuing Havoc at the end of this to close this out. Now, this actually has some of the better extras of any of the Epic collections. Most of them just have some paltry extras, but this actually has like character designs of all these new characters. Typhoon didn't make it into the book. Quetzal, or whatever, didn't make it into the book. Some of these characters didn't make it into the book, but pretty cool. This little vampire, pretty sweet. There's an interesting Jean Grey design. And we learn a little bit about like what they were intending with this whole deal. This is actually a prose story about the X-Men that gets thrown in here. Pretty fun. And that closes out the book. So, gosh, this is frankly one of the best things I've ever read. This is what comics should be. It's got single stories where each issue really tells its own story, and yet it's building into something more marvelous. And they layer in, like, Claremont really layers in these, like, oh, and Jean Grey is feeling this now, and there's something wrong here, and you'll see it, and you know you're going to see it in a few issues. Or Professor X is getting these weird telepathic things about space, and then it blew up into that big Shi'ar saga. And just the way he layers everything and keeps it rolling, keeps it fun, keeps the characters dynamic, keeps the conflict going, keeps the characters unique. It's just super fantastic. This is just comic perfection. So if you can get any book of comics, if you just want to check out comic books, this is it. Second Genesis, X-Men Epic Collection. I don't know if it's in print. I think it might be out of print. Sorry. But they tend to reprint these issues a lot in different formats, so you might be able to find some of them. There is an omnibus version also that's been out of print. I think actually Volume 1 went back into print, so that might not be that expensive as far as omnibuses go. But definitely worth the read. I'm going to actually continue my reading in the omnibus. I want to continue and see where the X-Men saga goes from here. Volume 6 Proteus will be coming out in July if you want to wait on the Epic Collection side. So you can get these two volumes together. And I think the next Epic Collection that they have, because the Epic Collections don't come out in order, they just put in, almost, they've got a plan, but it's seemingly random how they come out. The next one after that is Volume 12. So you've got a ways gap between the omnibuses and then what actually comes out after this. But they might be coming out with them in order from here on out up until they reach 12. So that's one way to read them. The omnibuses are out there, like I said. Volumes 2 and 3 continue Claremont's run of the omnibuses, but those are well out of print and hard to find. So good luck and happy hunting. Do you enjoy this? I don't know. Do you like this as much as I do? This is the first time I've ever read this X-Men stuff, so I'm very excited to get to it. Let me know in the comments what you think, and I will be back with more reviews and other things here on Diversity in Comics. Hit that like and subscribe button. See ya.